probably won't be doing any of that, but thank you so much.
Focus, 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 focus.
Nobody told me that this book is crack, and now I'm addicted to drugs. Thanks.
It's like a reward. I will always choose you.
Rune Dannon, Crown Prince of the Valbaran Fae.
I don't know what I'm talking about, and I never have. I never really have.
Okay. You got me there. But that is not a crime.
I hate that thing where people are like, oh, you've worn that shirt before. Like, no fucking shit. I bought the shirt.
Kay! Kay? Who says Kay? You're so stupid!
Dude, I'm getting my personality back though. Like, I'm feeling like myself again.
Yeah, I know.
I really was not myself.
I don't watch TV.
Like, no one cares. You don't get an award because you watch less TV.
You're coming home with me.
Can I talk my shit again?
Let's talk about some of the most popular TikTok books that I either DNF'd or did not particularly like. Y'all are in for a fucking treat because these are about to be so controversial. We're gonna start off strong with Credence. I DNF'd this 3/4 in. I just could not, like, as a thinking human being, I could not understand how a lot of people don't see a lot of psychological problems that are described in this book. That's just a no for me. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I simply just got bored, honestly, like halfway through this book. Just wasn't my cup of tea. Say You Swear is a book that I didn't necessarily not like, but it's so hyped up for no reason. Like, there were so many fucking characters in this book, and it did not need to be this thick. I'm sorry, somebody has to say the Raven Hood series. Now this is, I just wish I never read these series. They were so painful to read, I wish I never even, like, picked it up, to be honest. But if you're literally trying to sob, give these a try. All He'll Ever Be. I saw this book on my TikTok so much, and TikTok influenced me. What the fuck is this? Why? And you see, I DNF'd it literally 90% in. That's how fucking done I was with this book. Don't even get me started. It's a dark mafia romance, and there was a lot of filler chapters in this shit. A Million Kisses in a Lifetime. It's cute, but do I think about it on a daily? Absolutely not. Like, it was an okay romance that could have been, honestly, 300 pages long, but for some reason, it's this thick. Like, I understand that he bought her every single Chanel lipstick there, but, like, that was the cutest part of this book, but that's about it. I saved best for last. This was a pretty good read until I got into, like, the last two books, and then it just became super frustrating because they kept having, like, the same issues in their relationships, and I was just like, get your shit together. I think there's more books coming, so maybe the author will give me the ending that I deserve, and I won't be so pissed off about these.
I'm honestly kind of scared to make this video. This is my review of House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J Maas. I actually finished this a while ago, but I just haven't gotten around to doing a review on it. Let me start out by saying I absolutely loved House of Earth and Blood. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I loved the characters, I loved the world building, it was absolutely incredible. So I was really excited going into this book. I was ready for more of that world. And it kind of had a bit of a slow start to it, but I was like, you know, that's fine. I'm used to slow starts in fantasy books. Like, it always gets better. Like, you know, you hit a few hundred pages in and you just can't put it down. And I hit like 600 pages in, and trust me, I could put it down. I was really struggling to get through it. I think it was just the fact that there was not a lot of character building throughout it. I just feel like it was a very, very slow moving book that could have been packed into a lot less pages. And of course, if you love this book, I totally, like, everyone has different tastes. This was my experience reading it, and I feel like I was so hyped up from the first book that I was kind of expecting a lot more. The ending, however, did make up for a little bit of the slowness. I thought the ending was amazing. It made me excited for the next book, but I really feel like I didn't have to read how many pages? Like almost 800 pages to get to that ending. It was a real struggle for me to get through. So for that reason, I gave it a 2.5 stars to 3. I'm still deciding, honestly. I still really do love the world that it's set in, and I love a lot of the characters, and I am excited for like the story to continue. But I just was expecting so much more, and I'm so scared making this because I feel like there's such a big fan base around this book. And I understand the ending, like I get that, but yeah. Anyway, these are just my opinions, so please don't take any of this to heart. I am very scared posting this. But yes, I did really enjoy the ending, but it was a very, very hard book to get through for me.
Everything that kills me makes me feel alive.
What? So who does she think she is? Be when they discover you've died.
Nobody's heard from me for months. I'm doing better than I ever was. 'Cause and other girls dream that they be Ben's partner. They be Ben's partner. Man. Don't you know who I am? Remember my name. Hey, I'm gonna die young.
For a few pages, I could pretend.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
Don't talk to me. It might look like I'm physically here, but in reality for the next 3 days or so, I will be in a completely different world. Thank you.
And I will not be the person you settle for just because you cannot have her. I won't do it.
Here are a few books that I refuse to hear criticism on. I love these books with my whole heart, and don't criticize them. In this pile we have 3 fantasies and 1 historical fiction. We'll start with the old one now. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I am obsessed with this book. This book made me feel so many emotions. I got so attached to the characters. The story has so many plot twists that honestly I just couldn't see coming. And I bawled my eyes out at the end of this book, mainly because it was over and I couldn't read it anymore. But if anyone criticizes this book, I swear, I wouldn't understand. It's perfect. A Dance of Thieves. I love this book so much. Yes, it is worth all the hype that it gets. It is incredible. The world building is wonderful. The characters are just so great. The fantasy romance in here is just, I could not get enough. Once Upon a Broken Heart. Honestly, this book took me by surprise. I did not think I was going to love it as much as I did. But oh my gosh, the world is so magical and wonderful. That's the best way I can describe it. It's like fairy tale-esque romance in there, and the characters are so lovable, and oh my gosh, this book is incredible, and I will not receive any criticism on this. I know there is some out there, but please don't comment it on my video. I saved the best for last. The Six of Crows duology, but specifically Crooked Kingdom. I love Six of Crows, of course, as well, but for some reason this seemed even better to me. I think it was just because the found family, the characters in this, I just got so connected to. And oh my gosh, I cried my eyes out at the end. But oh, I love this book with everything in me. I think it is perfect. It is the best fantasy, well, one of the best fantasy books I have ever read. There may be a part 2 to this video. I have so many books that I love endlessly.
Socialize, romanticize life.
These are BookTok favorites that I think are absolute trash. Okay, I'm just kidding, but they could use some criticism. Disclaimer, just because I don't like them doesn't mean that you can't.
She fell in love with every guy she ever dated. Whether they were smart or stupid or sweet or cool, it didn't matter.
Okay, all night long. When I die, bury me with all my eyes on. When I die, bury me with all my eyes on.
There are only 18 weeks left of the year, so these are 18 books I want to read before 2023 ends. If you've read any of them, if you like them, if you hate them, let me know.
I think I'm feeling it now, just like you do.
This is part 2 to my top fantasy recommendations of 2023 so far, and a little bit about them. So The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Cassara Broadbent. This was such a unique fantasy book where it's kind of very much like Hunger Games but with vampires. So if you're immediately intrigued by that idea, I promise you will like this. It is a fantasy romance, and we are following our protagonist that's my dog, our protagonist Aurea, as she has to compete in a game of life and death, basically. This was just, I loved the world that this was in. It was unlike any vampire book I've ever read before, and I'm a sucker for vampire books. So I gave this one a 5 stars. House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas. This is the first book in the Crescent City series. I've always liked Sarah J Maas, but I haven't been like a diehard fan of her like so many other people. I do love her books though. But this was probably my favorite series that I have read of hers yet. I really, really enjoyed the world building. It's a modern fantasy, so it's unlike kind of anything that I've read else this year. This is a high fantasy technically, so it's a little bit harder to understand, but once you get past like the first 100 pages, it is just, you won't be able to put it down. It is so gripping. We are following our protagonist Bryce as she tries to track down a murder in her city. So years earlier, this murderer did something that hit her very close to home, brought her world to a crashing halt, and 2 years later she's still hunting this murderer as they strike again. I gave this book a 4.5 stars. I've saved the best for last. The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I gave this book straight away a 5 stars. It was incredible. If you're a sucker for magic schools, you will definitely like this book. We're following our protagonist Violet as she kind of competes entry for a magic school. This magic school has different quadrants, and she's trying to get into the Riders Quadrant. The Riders Quadrant is Dragon Riders. The enemies to lovers in this was incredible. So it's a fantasy romance, if you didn't know. Wonderful, really, really gripping read. Like, I guarantee you won't be able to put it down. It is so gripping. I cannot wait for the second book to come out in November. And I just loved the dragons in this. They were so well executed. I feel like it can be a little bit hard sometimes to get integrate mythical creatures into fantasy books, but she nailed it. I loved this book so much. These are my top fantasy romance book recommendations. I guarantee you will fly through all of these and just fall in love with the romance in these books. Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is probably my favorite fantasy romance of the year that I've read. It is slow burn, enemies to lovers. Jax in this book, if you know, you know. Stephanie Garber writes such a magical, immersive, fairy tale-like land that just makes the romance that much more magical and beautiful, I feel like is the best way to put it. A Winter's Promise by Christelle DeBow. I always recommend this book if you liked Once Upon a Broken Heart. It is, again, slow burn, enemies to lovers. Slow burn like no other fantasy book I have ever read. Again, the world building in this is just so magical, and it really adds to the romance in this book. So if you're looking for a unique fantasy romance, I definitely recommend the Mirror Visitor series. It is such an incredible series. The Last Hours series by Cassandra Clare. This is actually my favorite series by Cassandra Clare. The romance in this is unlike anything else. It is friends to lovers, but lots of kind of complications not allowing them to be together. It will literally have you on the edge of your seat, this entire series. This is actually the last book. There's 2 more before this. I just flew through these books. If you're looking for kind of a very light fantasy romance but that's going to keep you very, very much engaged, I definitely go for Cassandra Clare's books. They're always very lighthearted but kind of just very addictive. I feel like I can't do this genre without mentioning The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. The fantasy romance in this has been compared a lot to the romance in the ACOTAR series by Sarah J Maas. So if you liked that, I guarantee you will like this book if you've not read it already. I also really liked that our protagonist Violet is quite different to typical fantasy characters that I often read about. It's more kind of realistic, and I feel like I can relate to the romance a lot more, if that makes sense. She also has a chronic illness, Violet does, our protagonist, and I feel like I really enjoyed that representation, as I also struggle with chronic illness, so I very much recommend this book. These are my August hopeful reads. Please let me know if you've read any of these and what you think I should read first. I am in a bit of a book slump at the moment, mainly because I'm overwhelmed by all the choices I have to read, and I'm really excited to read them, except then I start reading a book and all I can think about is the next book I'm going to read, and then I can't focus on the book I'm reading, if that makes sense. Anyway, House by the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I've heard so many wonderful things about this book. It is a magical fantasy. I feel like I believe a little bit of romance in there as well, and it's just apparently so beautifully written. The world is absolutely stunning, so I cannot wait to read this one. I'm very excited about it. Girl Goddess Queen by Bo Fitzgerald. I am really excited about this book just because it's a Greek mythology retelling, and I love Greek mythology retellings. Like Percy Jackson and Heroes of Olympus series will always have my heart. They're like the series that got me into reading. So I am really excited about this. If you don't know, we are following Persephone and Hades in a love story, and it's a retelling in a more modern era, and I'm just excited about it. It seems like Persephone is painted in a very cool way. Over This Backbone by Yar Reeves. This is actually a new release and I'm very excited. It is contemporary romance, and it is actually written about where I used to live. So it's always fun to kind of have some similarities to it and be able to picture it. I believe this has a very strong female protagonist, which I am always willing to read a book with that. I'm pretty sure this will probably be one of my next reads. I'm very excited. Okay, the last few. This is what I need to be hyped up to read. If you don't know, a little embarrassing fact about me is, yes, me, hardcore fantasy reader, I haven't finished the Throne of Glass series. I finished ACOTAR and Crescent City series, so just saying. But yes, I haven't finished the Throne of Glass series. I've read up to Heir of Fire, and I'm told I pretty much stopped where it like gets insanely good. Like Heir of Fire was great. Anyway, the next two books on my TBR are Queen of Shadows and Empire of Storms by Sarah J Maas. I don't know why I'm so intimidated by this series, but I am. So please, even if I need to do a reading vlog to kind of read my experience first time reading it, please get me hyped up for this. I'm so nervous to enter this universe again. So high fantasy can be a very intimidating genre if you haven't read it or kind of read much fantasy in general. Here are a few book recommendations for if you're new to high fantasy and you don't know where to start, and these are good starting points. So Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm sure everyone has heard of this, but not everyone has read it, so I highly recommend reading Lord of the Rings. It is a great introduction to high fantasy. It's a great introduction to fantasy in general. The world building in this book, in this series, is just unparalleled to anything I have ever read, and I have read my fair share of fantasy books. I say that because the amount of work that went into building these worlds, there's literally like documents and documents of family trees for every single character in this book. There's like an enormous amount of maps for every place that they visit in this book. This book also isn't too long, so it's kind of a good start if you're new to high fantasy. Tolkien's writing style is also absolutely beautiful, very unique and lyrical, so this is a great starting point. Obviously, you say high fantasy, you think Brandon Sanderson. He has series upon series of high fantasy books, and they all kind of interconnected and have Easter eggs in each little book that you can pick up if you really get invested in his books, which I highly recommend you do. So the place to start in that incredible journey is The Final Empire, which is Mistborn, book 1. This really gives a setup for the Cosmere, the world that a lot of his books are set in. It gives you an idea the intensity of high fantasy worlds, but it's also a kind of slower introduction, so it doesn't overwhelm you too much. It's quite paced but still very engaging. And if you like Mistborn, well, there's a million recommendations from then on that I am still working through. And if you're still kind of in your fantasy romance era but also want to see if you like high fantasy, then I recommend Crescent City by Sarah J Maas. Now this is kind of on the verge of high fantasy. I don't know if I would classify it as it, but I feel like it's a good taster for high fantasy. It is quite a thick book, but it really gives you an introduction to kind of the world building that takes place in a high fantasy series, but it's kind of done in a lot more friendly way in this book. I feel like it's a lot easier to understand, it's quite fast paced, and there's also a very engaging storyline and very relatable characters. It's set in the modern era, so I think that also helps make it a little bit more understandable and beginner friendly.